quick question that dropped in for all of our panel, really, that wasn't really directed to anyone in particular. So I don't know who wants to have the first shot at this, but it was just asking that, given the new president, President Biden's past statements about corruption being effectively a national security issue, would you expect any new anti-corruption legislation to supplement or maybe even alter FCPA and SEC regulations maybe coming from the new administration?
I'll start by adding one comment to that. I would say that the FCPA has not significantly changed since the 1970s. Don't imagine it's going to change. It's pretty broad. The most recent resource guide has, given a lot of clarity as to their interpretation of it. There could be another resource guide again, but the last one we had was several years earlier. So I wouldn't anticipate a significant change in any of the regulations, but I do anticipate a lot more enforcement actions. But Kathleen and Jennifer, do you guys have thoughts?
This is Jennifer. I echo that. I agree. I don't really anticipate that we'll see new legislation per se, or even amendments to the FCPA. But I think that enforcement will continue to be strong, if not more so. And I think it will be a focus for the administration. And I think we have more to see. I don't know, Kathleen, if you have anything else to add.
No, I completely agree. I think that's right. I think you'll continue to see the resources there, and the activity under the current legislation. Because to Rajal's point, I think it certainly it is a tool that gets used and it has been used effectively. So I would expect to see more of that activity.
Fantastic. And another question that dropped in a number of times during the webcast, and I know pretty much everyone on this webcast is now intimately familiar with the likes of Zoom and what have you when it comes to remote interviews or remote meetings. Changes that have been implemented during the pandemic. Do our panel feel that there are any of the changes that have been recently implemented or implemented as the COVID-19 pandemic has arisen? Do you think any of these changes will persist in maybe a post-pandemic world? All of our speakers have dropped in numerous times. So any insight into any changes implemented that you think will persist?
This is Jennifer. I think there will be some changes that will continue. I've personally noticed that the way we've been handling briefings to DOJ have been, I think typically in the past we would have had sort of formal meetings with DOJ, which take additional time. They're more difficult to schedule. They happen less frequently when they need to take place in person. And I think, all of that has moved to, WebEx calls or telephone calls. And I think that will probably continue because it's more accessible. I think it's probably easier for both us and for the prosecutors to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes more frequent. I don't think it will completely replace in-person meetings, but I think it's a tool that people will be more comfortable using going forward, where I think before there was sort of an unspoken sort of, feeling an obligation that you need to go meet in person and sort of do all of that. I think from an investigation standpoint, I think there will probably be maybe particularly on the part of our clients, there's always pressure to save money, and one of the ways of doing that is to travel less when you're doing investigations and doing compliance work. And so there may be, continued emphasis on trying to do as much as we can remotely and not have to travel all over the world. But that being said, there are some aspects of doing an investigation and compliance work, training, audits that you really just need to be there. The quality of an interview is just infinitely better when it can be done in person versus over a phone call or a WebEx, particularly when you're, in multiple languages, different cultural backgrounds. Just doing it in person, to me, there's no sort of substitute. I don't know, Kathleen or Rajal, if you have your own thoughts there.
Yeah, I would add a thought. But Kathleen, I want to hear your thoughts too, but I think you're exactly right. The in-person body language and that cannot be duplicated in Zoom. But also the document review, which is usually the part I focus on, is nearly impossible. And a lot of times our clients tell us, they don't want us to spend money traveling, on expensive flights and staying in hotels. They prefer for us to do the work remotely. And so that is becoming easier now with all the technological tools that we have. It is still, clients don't always produce what we need, and there's back and forth. And every time you pick it up and put it down, it costs more time and more money. And the savings that you have on airfare and hotels are far exceeded by billable hours. Though some of it can still be done remotely, I think there is no substitute for getting on site and doing document review on site.
Yep, and this is Kathleen. I completely agree with both of you. I think it's going to be a mixed scenario going forward where we'll be able to, I think it's been a great development in terms of what we've all been able to do virtually, and we will still continue to use those means when appropriate, but there will still certainly be situations where it's going to make the most sense for everyone to be in person, and we'll just prioritize those times. So not maybe every meeting with the government or not every time that we need to look at documents, but it's really, we will have another option now with the virtual tools, but still I think we need to have some in-person work for sure going forward.